Hi, I'm going to talk to you today about assembling frames that are used inside the modified Warre hives. The standard hive does not use frames, so these are just strictly for the modified hives. Each box or hive body will contain 8 frames. You receive your frames, parts will be wrapped in cellophane. Basically each box, the parts are 8 top bars like this. Okay, this is what's called a wedge top bar. The wood on one side of the groove, it has a cut where it actually will snap out, okay, just like so. You snap out each one of these wedges from the top bars. And you'll take a Stanley knife and very carefully cut off any slivers of wood that remain. That basically is the portion that was uncut, that was holding the wedge in, okay? Keeping your fingers out of the way, you just use this knife and cut out those slivers of wood. It's not necessary to clean the slivers off of the wedge cleat itself. We can install foundation into the frames of the modified hives, or we can do foundationless beekeeping. We're going to talk about that in a little while, but in either case, this cleat will be used. Okay, so just set that aside. Okay, so you've got your top bar, wedge is removed, and it's clean. You'll need 2 side bars. Okay, that's these pieces here, and 1 bottom bar, which looks like that. Okay, this is what's called a grooved bottom bar. If you choose to use foundation, the bottom of the foundation will fit into this groove. Take your first side bar and apply a little bit of wood glue into the top, and then a little dab onto each ear, like so. Once you've got the glue on, take your top bar and push it right onto the side bar. Keep some paper towel around so you can wipe off any excess glue that comes out of their joint. Glue coming out of the joint, excess glue, is a good sign. It means you got enough glue on there, okay? Take a 1 1/4 inch nail, place it directly over the center of the side bar, drive it through the top bar, just like that, okay? Do the same thing on the other side. Okay, now that you have your top bar and your 2 side bars assembled, okay, we're going to flip that over, take the bottom bar and apply a little bit of glue to the sides, a little bit to the very bottom of each one of those little ears there. So liberal with the glue, okay? Slide the bottom bar into the bottom of the side bars, just like that, okay? Take the 3/4 inch nail, one of your 3/4 inch nails, and center it in the bottom bar, right above the side bar, just like you did the top bars, same exact thing. And then do the same thing on the other side. Alright, the next few steps are very important. We need to make sure that the frame is square and flat before the glue dries. You need a Simpson speed square to check the squareness of the frame. Take the wide part of the speed square and put it where the wedge cleat was and push it up against the side bar of the frame. If you look real close, there's a little bit of a gap down here at the bottom. So we're going to take the frame and just very slowly put some pressure, ease it over, and then recheck it for squareness. The next thing is to make sure that the frame is flat. The top bar facing you, the bottom bar away, hold down one corner against the bench and push the other side, thump on it with your finger. If the frame is twisted like this or this, one of these sides will not be touching the table, okay? This one's perfect. We got very lucky there, okay? Now if it was off, you simply would grab a hold of the frame and tweak it either this way or that way, and then recheck it until you have it flat. Alright? It's all real important to have it square and have it flat in order to maintain the proper bee space inside the hive. Okay? When the frames go in the hive bodies, these sidebars have to be making contact as part of the sidebar, 3 or 4 inches at the top. They should be exactly in contact with each other, one after another after another. There shouldn't be spaces here. Okay, that would indicate the frame is twisted, and what that will do also is the bottom bars will not be parallel with each other. Okay, it's not good. All right, so you got to make sure they're flat, make sure they're square. The last thing for us to do with this particular frame, I'm going to set this frame up for foundationless beekeeping. Alright, and we're going to use the wedge cleat to create a comb guide, okay? Because when you do foundationless beekeeping, you still need something to entice the bees to build the combs in the correct place, you know, within the confines of the frame and along the bar, alright? And a comb guide is what you need in order to do that. This comb guide still has that sliver of wood we were talking about. Make sure that that's up, facing you, so that it doesn't interfere with the way that the cleat fits back into the top bar. You'll simply, instead of the cleat being flat like it was, you'll turn it on its side and put it in place, like I say, with that slivered wood up toward you. Use your brad driver and a 1/2 inch brad and press it right into the center of that guide and into the top bar to secure it in place. 3 should be plenty, so 1 in the center and 1 on each end. To further entice the bees to build the combs where we want them, which is along this guide and within the confines of this frame, it is very much recommended that you use some beeswax on a brush and simply brush the melted beeswax onto the guide. Okay. Now, if you buy beeswax from us for this purpose, there will be an instruction sheet that all the precautions and instructions should be followed exactly. The basic point being that melting beeswax can be dangerous. Okay. Mostly because of human error. You should be using an electric hot plate. You shouldn't be in the kitchen. You use an electric hot plate out on your workbench like we have here. Do not use gas. Do not use anything that produces a flame to melt your beeswax. Okay? And the very, very most important thing with melting beeswax is never ever walk away from it. Okay? You have the pot on the burner, you stand here and wait for it to melt. And once it's melted 90% of the way, turn off the heat. Okay? Always use the very lowest setting. Let it melt slowly. Okay? If you see smoke or hear popping noises, you have the heat too high. All right? That being said, a little bit of artist's brush, you know, from the craft store or wherever, and simply brush on the beeswax. Put a couple different, couple layers. It should harden almost as soon as you brush it onto the guide. Okay, if it's not hardening almost immediately, you have it too hot. Okay, so wait for it to cool down for a few minutes before you continue. And all I've done is just brush down the large side of the guide, because on one side of this, because of the wedge cleat being broken out of the top bar, one side of the guide is more exposed than the other. Okay. Simply turn the frame around once that is covered and brush down this side. Now you don't need, and you really don't want, to apply wax to the top bar itself. Some of it is going to get on there, obviously, but don't intentionally cover the whole top bar with wax. And the reason for that is you really want the bees to be able to use their own beeswax to connect it somewhat to the top bar, okay, because it's actually a stronger bond. Okay? So leave some of the top bar bare wood. It will make your frame stronger in the long run. Okay. And that's all there is to it. Okay, so this is what we're going to use if you want to do foundationless beekeeping in your modified Warre hive. A frame with a guide that is coated with wax. Okay, the only thing that you can do beyond this to make this frame even better would be to wire it. And on our main menu there's a section titled Wiring Frames with a lot of nice photographs to guide you through that process. Alright, but wiring the frame will make it stronger. We've assembled a couple frames now, one that we put the guide in just a moment ago, and another one that we're going to use to demonstrate foundation sheet installation. What I'd like to show you is that these frames sitting flat on the bench, okay, upside down with the top bars down, you can see that the area here is between the sidebars are touching, there's full contact in that whole area. And the bottom bars are parallel to each other. Okay? That is how your frame should look. And as you continue to assemble your frames, you can just do this. You can just find a nice flat surface and just put one after another, after another, after another. And when you look down it, you'll know. If you happen to put one up there that's not quite flat, the other thing is, or not quite square, because the other thing is this here. When they're this way, these bars should all be flush. Okay? So square and flat. Right? And if you do them that way and just set them side by side as you're going, then you'll know. If you put one up there that's not flat, you're going to see it right away and you're going to recheck it and figure out what's wrong and then put it back up before the glue dries. Okay? Now this is our frame for people who want to do foundationless beekeeping. Okay? It just had the guide that we put in and waxed. Now I'm going to demonstrate how to put a foundation sheet in this frame. I want to answer a question that I get all the time, which is, should I use foundation or should I go foundationless? And if I should use foundation, why? Okay. The main reason people don't want to use foundation, well, two reasons I suppose. The first is that it's just simply unnatural for bees to build comb on man-made foundation. The other thing is that people are usually concerned about chemicals in the wax that is used to create the foundation, which is a valid concern, although I think it's overblown quite a bit. Most companies that make foundation are aware of the same thing that you are, and they are rotating their wax. Okay, they're only going to reuse the wax so many times. So used to be you got foundation sheets that were really dark, and that is an indication that the wax is older. Most of the foundation that you buy nowadays is very light color, like this one here. And you can just tell that this is not old brood comb. Alright? Brood comb obviously would be the comb that's exposed most to the chemicals, because that's what's in the hive when the hives are treated with coumaphos and fluvalinate, which is apistan is what it is. Coumaphos, incidentally, is some pretty bad stuff. That's what's in Checkmate Plus. That is the main ingredient in sarin nerve gas, in case nobody knew that. In any case, those are good reasons not to use foundation. However, if you're going to use a framed hive, it's risky not to use foundation. Okay, even with a waxed comb guide, there's still a decent chance, maybe 20% chance, that the bees will not build the combs where you want them. Okay. What they'll do a lot of times is they'll build them on the guide, but they'll build them off to one side so that they're not centered in the frame. Now that is not a huge problem in itself unless you want to move any of the frames inside the hive. Then it becomes a problem, because if you have one that's off-center this way and you want to put it next to another frame that's not off-center, or worse yet, off-center the other direction, the combs will hit and the bee space will be incorrect. Okay, so if your combs are off-center, even if you don't intentionally want to move frames around, you always have to be very, very careful to put them back exactly as they were taken out. If you don't, you basically will crush bees between the combs as you're putting the frames in and putting the sidebars together. Okay, that's the first problem. What would be worse than that is if the bees decided to, they'll do this, you know, like I say, at least 20% of the time. Probably more often they'll put them off-center than 20% of the time. 20% of the time they'll do what's called cross-combing, where they'll build a comb on the guide parallel with this bar, and then at the end it'll have a little curve in it, and it'll you know, if you had two frames side by side, the comb from that is in this frame over here could come down and then turn and finish on this frame. And then the next one would do the same thing, and the next one would do the same thing. Now that it might not be that way all the way across, because they could do some irregularities that would straighten it back out, so you might have 4 that are good and then 4 that are bad. If you have a top bar hive, a standard Warre hive, or an octagonal hive, it's not that big a deal to have cross combing, because you're not taking the combs out of there to inspect them. The only time you're going to need to remove them is during honey harvest, and in that case you just simply turn the hive body over and cut out everything that you need to harvest. But with a framed hive you have bottom bars, so if they cross comb it, turning it over won't do you any good, because you can't cut it apart there either. Basically what happens is you end up having to take a knife and go down in between the frames that are cross combed and cut it, and of course that is full of honey and it makes a heck of a mess. If you wanted to do that during harvest, it's a pain, but it's not the end of the world. But if you decided to cut the combs, if you want to do an inspection, your combs are cross-combed, or one of the boxes is cross-combed a little bit, if you start cutting into that, you're going to kill any brood that's in there, first of all. The second thing is honey that is in there is going to be released and start to drip down into the hive, and you're going to start drowning a ton of bees inside your hive. Bees are going to be furious. Okay, and they're going to try to clean up the mess. And it's basically going to be a disaster. Okay, I only say to go foundationless right off the bat if you're an experienced beekeeper and you plan to go in there on a regular basis and make sure that it is not being cross-combed. And on a regular basis, I mean like once a week. And that's not good for the bees. Okay, so the best recommendation I can make, especially if you're a new beekeeper, and even if you're not really, I think you're better off, and your bees are better off, if you start with foundation sheets in the frames. Now, next year, after your bees have drawn out these frames that have the foundation, you can pop in these frames in between. You can remove some of the old brood frames and pop in a blank. And then basically it's called checkerboarding. Okay, and you don't have to do every other, but never put 2 blanks next to each other. See, just put the blank in between 2 drawn combs. Anytime you want to put in a foundationless frame, put it in between 2 drawn combs, and that will force the bees to build the comb where you want it. Over time, you can rotate all of the frames that have the foundation out of the hive, and then you'll be foundationless, and then you'll never have to deal with cross combing. Okay, that would be the safest, easiest way to go foundationless. Okay, so let's talk about foundation itself. Okay, we sell 3 different types of foundation. We sell standard foundation, which is what they call the large cell foundation. That's been used for years and years. It's 5.4 millimeter wide cell. It's not recommended for brood chambers. Okay, it's not recommended for anything except if you want to use one of these modified hive bodies as a honey super. In traditional Warre beekeeping, we don't super a hive, okay? And the boxes, I don't like to call the hive bodies supers, we call them hive bodies. You say, you know, we're using a hive body as a super, okay? But if you refer to it as a super, that means it's a designated box that is never used for brood, all right? Which is not the case here, all right? The only thing I would call a super that we sell is a sections box for making comb honey. You can call that a super. In any case, the 5.4 cell foundation is what you would use if you were going to use a modified hive body only for collection of honey from the top of a hive. And you read the section on supering a Warre, you'll understand more about that. Okay. The other 2 types of foundation we sell are 4.9 millimeter cells, which is the small cell, and 5.1 millimeter cells. Okay. Basically, if you have bees that are raised on 5.4 millimeter foundation, say you bought local bees, I would recommend that the top hive body in your modified hive have 5.1 millimeter foundation. And then every successive box that you add below that have the 4.9 millimeter foundation. Okay? That is to help combat varroa mites. And if you read the section on honeybee pests, there's a whole lot more information about that. Okay, so that's the difference in the foundations, and you'll see in our store that there are 3 different types. The first thing we want to do is pull the paper back off and throw it away just like I just did. This is vertically wired wax foundation. It is already cut to length to fit inside your modified frame, your modified hive frame. Okay? It has, like I say, the vertical wiring, and on the ends of the wires are hooks. Okay? Those hooks are used to secure the top of the foundation sheet into the frame. Here's the problem with hooks most of the time. No matter where you're buying your foundation sheets from, whether it's from me or anybody else, and believe me, I've bought them from everywhere I can think of, these wires are not usually bent at a 90-degree angle to the foundation sheet. And what I mean by that is that if you were to take a square and put the sheet up like that, that wire should come off of the foundation sheet straight out. Most of the time, they do not. The problem with wires that aren't 90 degrees to the sheet, okay, is that when you put the sheet in the frame and then put the wedge cleat, which is what we're going to use to secure the foundation into the frame over the top of the wires, it will cause, because these aren't bent quite right, it will cause the sheet to distort like so. Alright? So the first thing you want to do is to look down the sheet like this and find any wires that are not at a 90-degree angle. This one's quite bad. Okay? This is hardened wire, and every now and then it will break. And I'll tell you what, it's better to break one off than to put it in there not bent properly. All right? You know, one of them breaks off, it's not going to be that big a deal. But one of them goes in that's, you know, not bent right, it's going to be a much bigger deal. Okay? Now, these aren't too bad. There was one that was way off, and there's one right here. It's off a little bit. Now, sometimes when you look down here, you'll see that the wires are like this or like that. That doesn't matter. Okay? All that matters is when you look at it this way, that you want all those wires to be 90 degrees from the sheet. Alright, so we pulled off our paper backing. We have made sure all the wires are 90 degrees to the sheet. We're going to take the frame and foundation, we're going to take the foundation sheet and tuck it into the bottom bar groove, that groove that we were talking about. Okay, we're going to set the sheet right in that groove. And we're going to look up here and we're going to see that this sheet is too tall, and this is common. Okay, and when I look at it, you can see all the little cells on the foundation sheet. So when I look at this, I can see that it is about a half of a cell too long. Now, based on how far that sits in the groove, we could easily take off a full cell worth of width. Okay, so each one of these little honeycomb cells, we're going to take one row off the bottom of the sheet. Now, one of the reasons that I want to show this in so much detail is I've actually had people call me and tell me that this is not possible. That it's not possible to cut these wires. I kind of chuckle at that. First off, I would never ask any of my customers to do something that I haven't done 100 times. Okay? I think the issue mostly, these wires are quite hard. And most of the issue, I think, is that when you have a pair of snips, like this pair, if they have any wear in them at all, the jaws will come apart just a little bit, just barely enough to show some light through when you look through them, and that will allow the wire to bend instead of be cut. All right? And I think that's where most people have the problem. Use a good pair of snips, and the other trick is as you're approaching the wire, we're going to cut off one row of cells here. As you're approaching the wire, put the wire way down in the jaws of the snips, okay? All the way back as far and close to the hinge point of the snips as you can. And when I say the hinge point, I'm talking about this little bolt. You can hear they're just cutting right through, okay? You'll cut right through this. It's not a big deal, all right? So we get our frame back up here and tuck the bottom of the foundation sheet back into the groove of the bottom bar, and then you see it lays in there just as it should. Okay. Those wires have to lay down and touch the top bar. Okay, and the bottom, it's not bent in any way, it's not bowing, it lays in there nice and flat. Okay. Now once we have our foundation sheet cut to the proper fit, we're going to put it in the frame and center it between the sidebars, because there's a little bit of space right here and right here. So center it so that those spaces are equal. Alright? Take your wedge cleat, and we talked about, you didn't need to clean the slivers off the wedge cleat. This is the same. When you put the wedge cleat over the wires, what's left here of the sliver is right here where I'm running my thumb. Put that facing up right against the foundation. That way it does not interfere with the foundation in any way. Alright? Now, press the wedge cleat in place. Brad driver with another 1/2" brad. And press the brad in to secure the cleat. Alright? Go to the other side. And I would normally be doing this, facing me, so it's a little tricky. Okay, so there's our 2 brads, one there and there. And you could put in 2 more, at 1/3 way and 2/3 way, but I usually just do 3, one in the center, one on each end. It's not going to come out of there. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Now all that's left to do is put in the pins. Okay, in the side of this frame there are 4 holes. Each sidebar there are 4 holes. You don't need pins in all of the holes. Okay, those holes are for wiring. When you wire your frames, you use all of the holes. When you use foundation, install foundation pins, they're like little clothespins. Okay, the foundation sheet is going to go into the slot or space in the pin, just like a clothespin goes over your clothesline. Simply slide the pin in, give it a push, and it's going to fit over the wire, more or less. I mean, it won't on every sheet, but it'll fit very close to the wire on this side, and that's what you want. On this side, it's going to be completely over the wire. Okay? And I centered that sheet before I put that cleat down, but it actually did move a little bit, but that's okay. I'm going to install the second pin. Okay, so we have 2 pins just in the center holes. The top hole and bottom hole are left empty. That's not a big deal. The bees will just fill up with propolis in a couple days. Flip the frame over. Same thing. Alright, and there it is. That's your finished product. The foundation sheet is nice and flat in there. It's not bowed. It's laying nice and flat. It's beautiful, really. It's a beautiful frame. It's nice and square, flat, perfect foundation sheet, pinned. It's ready to go.